Morning, everyone. Ah, there is somebody out there. That's good, that's good. This reminds me of when I first did communion many years ago, and some of our older members would remember Joy Stretter. And we were down Phillip Island coming home on Good Friday. I get a phone call, Joy Stretter saying, "I've got communion, but I'm sick." And Betty Can, the organiser of everything, said that you'd do it. Yeah, well, until 3 weeks ago, I didn't know I was doing this until I found out. I'm basing on Jonah and how he ended up where he did. And I read a prayer that he said as he was being swallowed by a large fish. The Bible doesn't say whale, but a large fish. And he was in there for 3 days. Now, remembering that in the tradition of the time, if you were out of action or you were basically dead if you hadn't come back or started breathing again for 3 days, you were dead, as happened to Christ. Anyway, he has said, "Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the belly of the fish, saying, I called to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of a Sheol I cried, and thou didst hear my voice. For thou didst cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood was all around me. All thy waves, thy billows passed over me. Then I said, I am cast out from thy presence. Shall I again look upon thy holy temple? The waters closed in over me. The deep was around about me. Weeds were wrapped around my head at the roots of the mountains. I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet thou didst bring up life from the pit. O Lord my God, when my soul fainted within me, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to thee into thy holy temple. Those who pay regard to vain idols and forsake their true loyalty, but I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to thee. What I have vowed I will pay. Deliverance belongs to the Lord. And the Lord spoke to the fish, who vomited out Jonah on dry land. Now, Jonah was a free spirit, and he was a Israelite. Now, in the time, Jerusalem and Nineveh were a bit like Melbourne and Sydney. They tolerated each other, but they didn't think much of each other. And Nineveh was a pretty rugged place, and the people had got a bit full of themselves. It was full of Gentiles, whereas Israel was Jewish domain. And God had asked Jonah to go across and inform them that their days were numbered if they didn't pick up their act. And Jonah was going, I ain't going over there. I'm not helping those Gentiles. I'm going to run away. To which he hopped on a boat. And once they got out, it was hit by the most horrendous storms. Now, old Jonah, he's gone, I'm not playing in this game. He's gone downstairs and he's gone to sleep. And all the sailors are panicking because they've never seen a storm as rough as this. And they start thinking, oh, what have we done to deserve this? And they all looked at each other and looked within themselves and they thought, no, but what about that bloke downstairs? and he was sound asleep. So they went down and they woke him up. And they were all praying to their own gods, and they said to Jonah, "To whom do you pray?" He said, "I pray to the God who created the earth, the wind, the water." And they said, "Well, what have you done?" And he said, "Well, I don't really know," but he did. He said, "The only way this is going to stop is if you throw me overboard." And eventually they did. And lo and behold, he was swallowed up by a large fish, and he read that prayer. Jonah ended up going to Nineveh and straightening them out in as much as you boys are in big trouble. You've thrown all of God's directions and ideas out the window, and you're living your own life. And that's going to come to a rapid end unless you turn your act around. And he was pretty convincing. So the king of Nineveh did what was suggested, and they got rid of all their fancy clothes and that, and wore sackcloth. And God took mercy upon them, as he had promised he would do. But Jonah played the part of the messenger. And I wonder how many times we, as human beings, decide, no, we don't want to do that. And I firmly believe the passage between where we are and where God wants us could be a straight line. But God gave us the power of free choice. And sometimes we go, "Oh, gee, I don't think I want to go there." So we shoot off to one side. Just imagine it being a branch. And so we wander down that little path, and something occurs. I know it's happened a couple of times in my life. The first time when I was with the RA, I was down in Southland, and I was attacked. Long story short, he came off second best, but as a result of that, under WorkSafe, I had to get counselling. And the counsellor who I was sent to, or who was the counsellor for the company, he was the most effeminate, insignificant little character you could possibly imagine. In fact, being one of the He-Man mechanics, we tended to ridicule this bloke a bit. Anyway, needs be, I had to go and counselling. I tell you what, within 10 minutes, that bloke was about 10 foot high, and man, could he straighten things out. From that day on, I wouldn't have heard a word against him. And that's I got sent back. I could have gone further out, but no, I started heading back. Then a bit later on, something else happened, and I wandered off again. Hit a roadblock. I could either go left, I could go right. One way led me further away from the planned trip, the other way led me back to it. And I think eventually, and if you look at your lives, you will see where you have stepped off that beaten path or that one track. And if God hadn't granted us free will to do as we wanted and to make the decisions, then wouldn't Jesus have wasted his time because we were going straight ahead? God knew that we were going to be a bit adventurous and go left and right, but he wanted us to come back to the final point. And right up until, I believe, the day you die, you still have that ability and that privilege to think, "Oh, I think I stuffed this up. I want to go head back." And heading back is where you feel comfortable. And the last time it hit me was many moons ago, and Bob will remember. Bob and I left this church because we couldn't see eye to eye with the powers that be, and it went against our grain. And we said, no, no. And I wandered around. I've got to admit, I didn't go to church. Occasionally I went down to where Alan was, but no real big deal. I wasn't interested. And then I met or caught up at a funeral with Rosemary, and she chewed my ear a little bit, as Rosemary is wont, but it was to good effect. She presented a very, very convincing argument that I ought to come back because things aren't the way they were. So lo and behold, she managed. Maybe I came because of a fear of being, what was the word, vitriolic chastisement I might have copped, but I came back, and I have never felt so welcome as when I came back. So I'd taken a turn. I was coming back to the path. I then went and spoke to Bob and said, hey, you want to come down here? It's nothing like what it was. And Bob's gone, I wouldn't want to be, but he came with me with Estelle. He's been here ever since, as has Estelle. Come back. Bob didn't wander far, I know that much. Neither did Estelle. But we came back to follow that path which the Lord has outlaid for us. And we can kick and scream and want to go our own way. And God will say, okay, job's right, away you go. Let's see where you get to. And we'll strike a roadblock. And then you go, oh, God, what do I do now? And he'll, well, you didn't listen last time, why are you going to listen this time? On your way, and you can either go further away and feel more miserable, or you can start to come back. And eventually, you will be where you are meant to be in a time frame that's been allocated to you. And no matter what happens, you're going to end up where God wants you. Sometimes I wonder, and that's where Christianity is, I think, the ability to accept God's will and go in the direction that he is pointing you. God knows what we want, and God knows what we need. God will not very often give you what you want, but he will give you what you need. And when you've got there, you say, well, I didn't realise I didn't really need the flash house, the flash car, the big bank balance. I've got everything I need here. I've got warmth, I've got food, I've got company, I've got happiness. A lot of miserable people are very, very wealthy. As someone, I think it might have been Spike Milligan, money doesn't make everything, but it makes miserable a little bit more tolerable. But it doesn't make you happy. So, this could be the shortest sermon in creation. But I am not going to speak anymore, just leave you with the thought that no matter which plan of action you are going to take, the man upstairs is still holding the reins. You give your heart across to him, and you've got no idea where you're going to end up, but you're going to be very happy when you get there. Let us give thanks. Lord, thank you for this opportunity. Hopefully it made some sense. I ask that you allow us the ability to wander. It's a journey of discovery, and through this discovery we work out what is right, what is wrong. And at the end of what is right, you will be there. Again, what is wrong, we don't know. I don't think it's going to be happiness, but you give us the chance to come back until our last breath, for which we say thank you very much.